So Article 50 has been triggered and we now face 2 years of uncertainty. We've already seen the pound fluctuate in the aftermath, but will these highs and lows remain throughout the negotiations or will calm be restored? Marc Ostwald of ADM Investor Services joins me now. Hello to you. Thank you for coming in. It's going to be a long process. 2 years is a long way to go. And we've already seen, like I alluded to just now, the fluctuations in the pound. We did see it resume some strength. And also want to mention later on the London Stock Exchange Deutsche Börse situation, because that's another element in all of this. Let's start with the pound. Yep. What's going to happen in the next 2 years? Is it all about the negotiations driving it?
It's certainly going to be a lot about the negotiations. I think a lot of the time we'll need to extract what is actually to do with Brexit and what is actually to do with global interest rate expectations, because a lot of the fluctuations that we've seen, particularly this week, have been far more to do with the fluctuations in sentiment towards the US dollar after the Healthcare Act. And rather less to do with actually any news flow to do with Brexit. But we know that Mrs May is not going to be providing us with a running narrative, or running commentary, as she calls it. So the risk that we have, obviously, is there's going to be quite a lot of sourced information, people providing their opinions, which will not necessarily be particularly unbiased. And that will drive quite a lot of the volatility. I would expect volatility to remain, relatively speaking, elevated. Not quite as dramatic, obviously, as we saw last June and July, but definitely elevated.
What about with the euro then?
With the euro, well, it's dual aspect, because again, it's not just about Brexit, it is also about the political cycle to do with the elections in the Eurozone. And obviously quite heightened risks there that the policy outlook may change quite dramatically. And indeed the fact that we've been underestimating how well the Eurozone economy is performing at the moment. So there are a lot of complex factors interacting here. And unfortunately the narrative around sterling, whether it's against the euro, whether it's against the dollar, is going to be all dictated by Brexit. However, a lot of it may actually be to do with other factors. And that's when, if you're trading this, you need to be actually very, very careful what the reason for the trade is, because a lot of the reasoning may not be solely down to any news flow to do with Brexit, and great care will be required.
A Trump tweet, for example?
Yes, that sort of thing. I mean, you know, it probably won't be a sort of a specific bit of guidance as we get from Mr. Trump, but Whitehall source, Brussels source, Berlin source says X, Y or Z.
Unnamed sources.
Unnamed sources, and that will, you know, definitely pace the volatility that we're going to see, along with expectations on UK interest rates, where we're in a tricky situation at the moment in terms of the balance between the inflation outlook, the wages outlook and the overall growth outlook.
And the UK economy, the health of it, essentially. Yeah. I just want to mention this Deutsche Börse and the London Stock Exchange, because this is very relevant, because minutes afterwards we had the news that actually this merger, it would have been somewhat $30 billion worth, it's been blocked.
Yeah.
Because it won't be based in London, or it was going to be based in London. They're against it being based in London. Whatever it was, the point is it's been blocked. Is this something that we're going to see more of going forward?
It really depends. As we know, as part of the initial bargaining on the negotiations between Brussels and London, a lot of things that depend on whether people rule, we get ECJ rulings, and I think in terms of mergers and acquisitions, probably rather less. Apart from anything else, given the uncertain backdrop, both sides will probably not be overly keen in terms of UK corporates or European corporates to be doing a lot of M&A in either direction, because they really don't know what the terms of doing business with the UK or the UK doing business with the EU is going to be in 2 to 3 years' time, and therefore...
which is the problem.
Yes,
you don't know.
Exactly. It is, it's uncertainty.
Businesses plan way in advance of that, so that's the problem.
Yes, and that is going to create a lot of fluctuations in terms of the economy. It will tend to bear down on business investment here in the UK without a shadow of a doubt. But we shall see. You know, it doesn't actually prejudge what the outcome is. It's really difficult to say whether there'll be a positive or a negative outcome. I think there are certain guidelines that we've got at the moment, particularly the initial thing that the British government is putting security and defence as a bargaining chip, And the EU, unsurprisingly, has said, well, there'll be no further negotiations unless we establish something about the rights of EU nationals and British nationals on the continent initially.
They're both trying to get the best scenario, right?
Absolutely.
And that's how it's going to be for the next 2 years, pretty much.
Yes.
Okay, Marc Ostwald, thank you very much indeed for that. So we've got to be fair, it's not going to be dull, and that's certainly for sure when it comes to these 2 years of negotiations with our Brexit from the EU.